10. Café du Monde. Café du Monde is probably one of the most well-known places on this list, mostly for having what many people say are the best beignets in town. But there can be a problem with the service. No, not from the employees, I'm sure that they're amazing, but apparently some people give their order to a waiter only to never have it arrive, or see the waiter again. Since the restaurant is open 24 hours a day, some customers have seen some freaky things at night, including a ghost waiter, who has been haunting the place for decades. No one knows who they might have been, but they must have loved their job a whole lot if they keep coming back to work after they've passed on. Or maybe they worked themselves to death and can't escape the horrors of the night shift. As someone with a lot of restaurant experience, I feel bad for not only the ghostly server, but for the folks who never got their orders. Number 9. The Old French Opera House. Before we move on to number 9, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing videos. While it no longer stands today, and many bars and businesses take up the space where it once was, the witch of the Opera House still lurks in the area of her final resting place. Her story begins in the 1860s. Her name was Marguerite, and she made quite a splash during her debut, but not because she was a good singer. Apparently she wasn't. But it was because of her beauty. After a while, people began to see through her, and they realized that beauty wasn't enough to carry a show, and her career dried up. Financially ruined after losing her career and husband due to a sudden accident, Marguerite decided to fall back and open a bakery. But there was a problem. She couldn't bake. So she sent for the best Parisian pastry chef that she could find, and he came to work for her. And he was pretty easy on the eyes. They fell for each other and they were happy for years. Then one day she heard that her new husband was cheating on her and had a second apartment that they used as a love nest. Enraged, she went to the apartment in the middle of the night, turned on the gas in the fireplace, and left with the gas leaking out. The chef and the mistress suffocated, and Marguerite broke into the opera house and hung herself from the chandelier in her old costume, which she'd stolen from the production. They say that you can still hear her and see her screaming for her lost love in the street where the opera house once stood. Number 8. The Old Absinthe House. It was originally built in 1752, but burned down in the Great Friday Fire of 1788. When it was rebuilt, it became a place for people to meet and discuss less than savory topics, and have some absinthe, a very strong alcohol that was said to have hallucinogenic properties. While many people gathered for drinks here, there was one meeting that took place that was instrumental in American history. According to the legend, in 1815, General Andrew Jackson called for a meeting with someone you wouldn't expect, a notorious pirate by the name of Jean Lafitte. Now, why was a general meeting with a pirate? Well, he needed help with the impending battle with the British for the city, and he knew that Jean knew the city and its surrounding swamps and waters like the back of his hand. In exchange for full pardons, Jackson had Jean's army of pirates released from jail so that they could assist with the war, and they actually helped him turn the tide of what became known as the Battle for New Orleans. Lafitte can still be seen at his favorite spot in the bar on the second floor, wearing his hat and indulging himself with food and drink. Others have spotted the ghosts of Andrew Jackson, as well as Marie Laveau and Madame LALAURIE, both of whom we'll talk about in a little while. With all of these spirits around and reports of slamming doors, footsteps, and flying bottles, I'd stay away from here. In our number 7 spot, we have the Faulkner House. William Faulkner was a Nobel Prize winning author who wrote many amazing works, including The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying. Faulkner moved to this house on Pirates Alley in the 1920s, and it's actually where he wrote his first novel, A Soldier's Pay. The house was bought by a couple in 1990 and turned into a bookstore, but apparently Faulkner never left. Visitors report the smell of pipe smoke, which the author was smoking constantly, while the new owners were not, as well as books falling off the shelves, usually books written by him. I feel like buying a haunted book is just a recipe for trouble, even if it's a classic. Number 6. Le Petit Theatre. Established in 1916, this theater has been the host to many plays and performers over the years, but one has become more infamous than the rest. In 1930s, many plays were coming through, touring the South, and one of them was led by a performer called Caroline. Her last name has been lost to time. Right before a performance, she decided to go for a walk outside on the theater's balcony and tragically fell over the rail and lost her life. Now, visitors of the theater who go stand in the spot she fell from report a sudden drop in temperature and feel a pull towards the edge. Some people also say that they've seen Caroline's reflection reflection in the water of the theater's fountain, still in costume, ready to go on stage. What is it with Nola and haunted theaters? Number 5. Sultan's Palace. In 1839, Jean-Baptiste Lepret purchased a lavish half-story mansion from a struggling dentist as a new home for his brother, who just so happened to be a sultan from a far-off land. When the sultan arrived by ship, he brought with him a harem of wives, eunuchs, and all sorts of lavish furniture, all of which paraded through the street on their way to the house. Townspeople who lived nearby heard all-night parties and the smell of smoke emanating from within the palace, and were put off that they were never invited. But one day a man was walking by and he saw something shocking. Blood dripping down the front steps and forming a pool in the street. The man fled to a police station to tell them about what he'd found, and when the police arrived, they saw quite a grisly scene. Bodies were lying all over the floor, some with missing limbs, some cut open and broken as though some sort of beast had torn them apart. But the most disturbing find was in the courtyard, where through the wet soil a hand was reaching up, but not moving, as if whoever belonged to it was asking for help after being buried alive. When they dug him up, they recognized him as the Sultan himself. The case was never solved, but it was believed to be the brother's doing that caused the horrors, as his body was never found, and he had the most to gain from the Sultan's death. Number 4. Pharmacy Museum. Now, I know a pharmacy museum doesn't sound that exciting, but stay with me here. In 1823, Louis de Filot, the nation's first licensed pharmacist, opened a pharmacy where the museum now stands, and ran it successfully for years. But in 1855, he sold it to Dr. Joseph Dupas, who lived there until he died of syphilis in 1867. But it seems that he got what he deserved. Dr. Dupas allegedly was performing shocking experiments on pregnant slaves, as well as other horrible things like poisoning with what he told people was medicine. It is said that his spirit is doomed to haunt the museum, where some of the remnants of his grotesque experiments still remain, and visitors have reported seeing him in a brown suit, throwing books, and even pushing people to the ground. He seems like a vengeful spirit, so stay away from here. Number 3. Marie Laveau's house. Marie Laveau is perhaps one of the most well-known and allegedly most powerful voodoo practitioners of all time. Born in 1794, she was the student and successor of Dr. John, a voodoo priest who was supposedly an African prince from Senegal. She would often conduct business in Congo Square, earning the favor of slaves by giving them charms, cures, and even spells in return for information on their masters. She used this information when the masters requested her services to impress them in a simpler way before showing her true power and conducting rituals. The house where she lived was also said to be a meeting place for people, where they performed chants and rituals late into the night. The house was torn down in 1903, but a new structure, which is now a vacation rental, was built on the same foundations, and some say that that's how her spirit still remains in the house. One couple recounted the story of their stay, where late one night they heard chanting and drumming. They checked outside, but there was no one there. When they realized the sounds were coming from the empty living room, they decided to not sleep there that night. Good call. When they returned the next morning, there was a single pristine feather lying in the middle of the living room, but all of the doors and the windows were locked tight. They checked out immediately and never returned, because to a voodoo practitioner, a feather is good luck, but to an unsuspecting person, it is an omen of death or a hex having been placed upon you. So stay away from here if you don't wish to be cursed. Number 2. St. Louis Cemetery. Number 1. Established in 1789, this cemetery is New Orleans' oldest extant gravesite and is also considered one of the most haunted cemeteries in the US. With over 700 tombs and over 100,000 dead buried here, it makes sense that there would be some spirits that hung around. While most ghosts are said to haunt the places that they died, and not their graves, something about this place draws them in, and there are some very famous ones who reside here. Allegedly, our good friend Marie Laveau is seen here more often than anywhere else, though some claim that she still lives after creating an immortality potion, and she comes here, where her tomb also resides, to communicate with the dead, only to be mistaken for a spirit. It's said that if you place 3 X's on her tomb, your wish will be granted, and if it is, you must return and place a gift, or you will face the consequences. Some people report falling ill here, sudden bruises or cuts appearing, and hearing voices. Other spirits of the cemetery cemetery include that of a sailor whose family tomb was sold out from under him while on the high seas, and he's looking for somewhere to rest his soul. And finally, we reach number 1, the house of Madame Delphine LALAURIE. Delphine was a wealthy woman of high stature who married into even more riches and a grand house. She was also played by Kathy Bates in season 3 of American Horror Story. Her and her husband were often heard screaming and arguing all the way from the street, and he eventually left her after finding out some of her dark secrets. LALAURIE was a monstrous woman who performed terrible experiments on slaves that worked in her house, and her world came crashing down when a fire started in her home. When men arrived to put the fire out, they found many horrors in the attic. They found 7 slaves who were suspended by the neck and stretched and bent into horrible positions which they were bound into. Some had pieces of skin flayed off or missing limbs, and one woman had apparently had her bones broken such that she could be fit into a box. Delphine fled the city that night and never returned, but it's said that the ghosts of those who were mutilated there haunt the house looking for their revenge. A man who lived there in the 1900s heard the voices telling him to do horrible things, and eventually he took his own life, proving that the spirits want no one to enter the house where such atrocities happen.
Number 10. Jackson Square. Located in the infamous French Quarter in New Orleans, Jackson Square is riddled with terrifying spirits wreaking vengeance. Historically, the square was used for public executions, and it's believed that all who died there haunt the grounds looking for revenge on those who took their life. Those that walk through have felt like they're being followed or seen unexplainable lights and shadows in their photos, and all leave feeling confused and scared that something was trying to get them. So if you are planning to visit, just be careful where you step foot, cause you might not be so lucky as those that have tried before. Next up at number 9, Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. Despite its name, Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop is actually now a bar, and although it may look like a cute old building from the outside, it holds a few terrifying secrets that haunt the locals to this day. It's believed to be haunted by the infamous brothers Jean and Pierre Lafitte, a pirate duo who used the shop as a front for their smuggling operation quite successfully for many years. The brothers were eventually arrested for their operation, and perhaps that explains why the spirits have never left. Now a bar for locals, the ghost of Lafitte has been seen by many, haunting the pub along with a mysterious woman that appears suddenly in the mirror on the 2nd floor. No one knows just who she is, but those that have witnessed her apparitions were sent running in terror and have never returned. Coming in at number 8, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. To date, it is the oldest church in New Orleans, so it's no surprise that it also is one of the most haunted places in the city. Back in the day, the building was used as a sort of pseudo-morgue, where they would house bodies waiting to be transferred to the St. Louis Cemetery. Over the years, the church housed many victims of yellow fever and even a few people that had been killed, and it seems the souls stuck to the church despite being buried elsewhere. Those that enter feel immediately watched and have this terrible, eerie feeling that they can't seem to shake. While no one has seen apparitions yet, locals agree that there is no doubt it is haunted, and many avoid it if they can. Next up at number 7, the Haunted Hotel. Very appropriately named. This hotel is the known site of at least 12 killings, and the infamous Axeman of New Orleans is said to have lived at this very hotel during his notorious rampage of the city. Years later, a bloody axe was found at the hotel when undergoing renovations, and it's now actually displayed in the lobby for all to see. Those that have dared to stay at the haunted hotel have witnessed terrifying apparitions, and many have left in the middle of the night fearing that the spirit of the Axeman had come back to hurt them. So stay if you dare, but beware, as it could be your last night in this realm if you do. Next up at number 6, the JIMANI Lounge. The site of a tragic fire in 1973, the JIMANI Lounge is one of the newer haunted locations in New Orleans. The upstairs lounge at JIMANI was a gay bar at the time, when somebody intentionally committed arson, killing 32 of the patrons and brutally injuring hundreds more. The upstairs lounge never reopened, but to this day, the ghosts of the men who died there haunt the halls looking for answers and seeking revenge on whoever did this to them. Visitors of the JIMANI bar say that they feel the presence of the tormented souls and often cite inexplicable icy chills, hearing voices when no one is around, and even the smell of burning flesh. So enter if you dare, but make it clear clear you come in peace, as you never know what might happen if you make the wrong move. Coming in at number 5, the Hotel Monteleone. Built in 1886, the Hotel Monteleone was once a beloved place to rest your head for the night, but it's now a terrifying place full of spirits that shock all who enter. Sadly, many died from yellow fever at the hotel, and the spirits continue to haunt the halls to this day. They can be heard running around the 13th floor, and some guests have even witnessed the spirits asking to play hide and seek or reaching for their hands, saying they're lost, only to disappear as soon as they make eye contact. Another haunting entity is William Wilder, a guest who was killed while staying in the hotel, but there are countless other spirits walking the halls that have yet to be named. Over the years, paranormal investigators have visited, attempting to get the spirits on camera, but all they've captured are creepy encounters that make their spine tingle. Next up at number 4, the BEAUREGARD-KEYES house. Now a museum, this house was once home to Confederate General Pierre Beauregard, the Sicilian Mafia, and later beloved author Francis Keyes. Ghosts from the Civil War are believed to haunt the museum, and many guests claim to have heard loud footsteps or even seen bloody soldiers, missing limbs with their faces blown off, wandering the grounds, staring blankly into the distance. Legend says Paul Morphy, an acclaimed chess player during the 19th century, was born in this haunted house, and it's believed he was driven mad while living there, becoming possessed by a demon and running down the street with an axe, threatening to kill anyone who came near him. He was later found dead in that same house, and is believed he haunts it among the soldiers and victims of the mafia to this day. Coming in at number 3, Muriel's Seance Lounge. Back in 1788, Pierre Jordan purchased the building now known as Muriel's Seance Lounge, only days before one of the worst fires to ever hit New Orleans. Determined to fix things, Jordan rebuilt the building and soon called it home. But sadly, Jordan had quite the gambling problem and risked his home on a steep bet while playing poker, and sadly lost his home forever. As the legend goes, Jordan was so distraught about losing his home, he hung himself on the 2nd floor so as not to have to live without it. Today the building is full of spirits. People have heard a strange woman's voice coming from the walls during seances, and many say it is not unusual to witness objects flying across the room or see glasses shattering throughout the courtyard. Some believe the seances have allowed too many spirits to enter, and fear that the spirits are becoming angrier and angrier as the years go by. So enter if you dare, just be careful you don't get possessed while contacting one of the many spirits that haunt the halls. Next up at number 2, MYRTLES Plantation. On top of being the site of many tortured slaves during the 18th and 19th century, the plantation house, now a haunted bed and breakfast, is rumored to be built on top of an ancient burial ground. The most famous ghost that roams the ground is Claire, a slave of the family who poisoned the mother and daughters after having her ear cut off for listening to conversations through a keyhole in the door. Chloe was killed after poisoning the family and is believed to walk the grounds wearing a green turban and terrorizing guests. But she is not alone. At least 12 other ghosts are known to haunt the grounds to this day, including the family that owned the plantation and other souls of the tragic deaths on the property. Visitors have witnessed inexplicable handprints or faces suddenly appearing in mirrors, and the apparition of a girl who will practice voodoo on sleeping guests. So unless you are looking to get possessed in your sleep, it might be best to look for another place to stay. And last up in our number 1 spot, the Ursuline Convent. Back in the 1700s, the convent was run by nuns and housed casket girls. Casket girls were young women who had come from France to marry colonists and got their name from the casket-shaped boxes containing their belongings that they were holding when they arrived. After their arrival, strange things started happening and the girls started disappearing. Locals declared them to be vampires out to kill them. The 3rd floor had been where they were residing, and to protect the nuns and other citizens of the town, it was decided the doors would be sealed shut with nails blessed by the Pope, and no one ever dared set foot on the floor again. That was until 1978, when 2 paranormal investigators wanted some answers to the legend opened and camped out in front of the convent. As the legend goes, the two dozed off during their investigation, and the next morning, the doors that were previously nailed shut had wiggled loose and the investigators were found dead, torn open and drained of their blood. So if I were you, I would leave this off of the list of visiting spots. Starting us off at number 10 is Louisiana Old State Capitol. This neo-Gothic cathedral-like castle was built back in 1846 after the Louisiana legislature decided to relocate the capital away from the sinful lifestyle scattered across New Orleans. For many years it housed some of the most esteemed and prestigious lobbyists and lawmakers, and although it's no longer used for politics, it is far from empty. Said to be haunted by numerous entities like a security guard and a girl who lived nearby during construction, the most notorious is that of Pierre Couvillon. Once a senator in the Capitol's prime, it said Pierre dropped dead from a heart attack in the building after a spirited speech about the corruption of politics. Visitors say his ghost still haunts the halls to this day, and he can often be heard stomping around the Senate floor or playing tricks on the staff. Once while making his nightly rounds, a security guard, an alive one to be clear, not the ghost, said he felt a tap of a cold finger on his shoulder, but when he turned around, nothing was there, but he knew he wasn't imagining it, as afterwards it sounded like something or someone was giggling. Most creepy of all is the numerous reports of staff saying they've seen motion detectors go off only to find an empty room upon inspection. So they would go back and check security tapes, but nothing had entered or left at the time the sensors were triggered. Coincidence? You tell me. Coming in at number 9, the Woodland Plantation. Owned by notorious pirate and seafarer William Johnson, during its active years it was used as a sugar plantation, housing and torturing a multitude of slaves. It likely comes as no surprise that Johnson was not revered as a kind man. Not only did he frequently kill for his job at sea, but he was notoriously cruel to his slaves too, with many reporting he would not bat an eye, executing or beating any who dared question his power or step out of line. Today, those brave enough to visit report hearing the cries of the tortured souls echo through the house, as well as lights turning on and off independently, and unexplainable bursts of cold air even in the blistering heat of summer. Most terrifying though is those that have witnessed the ghost of Pierre Lafleur, a man who briefly lived at the house after its days as a plantation, who after running out of money took to the chandelier in the living room and tragically ended his life. I will not be taking my chances with that one. Next up at number 8 is the USS Kidd. Maybe I just watched too much Pirates of the Caribbean as a kid, but there is something extra scary about a haunted ship. During World War II, this boat was a destroyer ship for the US Navy, named after Admiral Isaac Kidd. Kidd tragically lost his life to the attack on Pearl Harbor, but surprisingly, this isn't where the boat gets its ghost story from. On April 11th, 1945, a Japanese plane committed a attack, plummeting into the boat, killing 38 sailors and leaving 55 others badly wounded. Today it's no longer used as a warship, but remains docked in the Baton Rouge as a war memorial, and all that enter say they've felt spirits of the sailors who lost their lives inside. Visitors claim to see full-bodied apparitions of the spirits decked out in their war uniforms, as well as ghostly arms and legs creepily floating around, looking as if they were brutally ripped from the rest of the body. But whatever you do, just stay away from the sleeping quarters, as that's where things get even worse. Those that have ventured down say the blood-curdling screams of the soldiers can be heard bouncing off the walls, and some even say they've been pushed or grabbed by the tortured souls right up until they step foot off the ship. Coming in at number 7 is Chrétien Point. First run by Hippolyte Chrétien, a French colonist, Chrétien accrued a massive wealth operating his cotton plantation off the backs of slaves. On top of that, Chrétien also had some less than friendly friends, one of which was the famed pirate Jean Lafitte. One day, Chrétien's son, Hippolyte II, fell in love with the neighbor girl Felicity Nada. She was a fiery, passionate, and independent Spanish woman, and despite pushback from his father, father, Hippolyte married Felicity and the pair remained happily together. Once his father died, Hippolyte took over the family business, but sadly he died of yellow fever shortly after in 1839, leaving Felicity to keep things running. She took pride in this position and accrued even more wealth than her father-in-law or husband ever had, eventually even becoming friends with the pirate Jean Lafitte herself, just as her father-in-law had. But after Lafitte's death, his crew thought they could pull the wool over Felicity's eyes and steal from her beloved home. But they were no match for the widow. Upon the break-in, she shot a pistol right between the eyebrows of one of the pirates, sending the rest running for their lives. Eventually, Felicity died, but eternally devoted to her plantation, her spirit has never left. Visitors say you can still hear the deadly gunshot clear as day in the hall, as well as the sound of bodies tumbling down the stairs. Just be careful if you do decide to visit. Felicity does not always take kindly to visitors. Next up at number 6 is LABEAU Mansion. Once the plantation of a wealthy businessman in 1846, in 1905 the property was sold and converted into a hotel and casino. Now at the time, gambling was outlawed in New Orleans, but it became quite the popular hang spot during Prohibition. While patrons were likely pulled in by the promise of booze and gambling, it didn't take long before they realized the building was haunted by dozens of spirits. Partygoers often complained their watches immediately stopped working the minute they stepped foot on the property, only to magically be good as new once they left. Many claimed to hear strange noises echo through the halls, and others nearly fainted seeing the woman in white who sat on the upstairs porch. Then in 2013, a group of so-called paranormal investigators that by the sound of it were more like a group of drunken idiots, snuck onto the property looking to catch one of the many rumored entities said to haunt the historic halls. But having no real clue what they were doing, decided to light fire on the building in an attempt to provoke the spirits to show themselves. Sadly, all they did was burn it down. However, the fire was no match for the spirits. Even without the walls to hold them in, all the entities remain haunting the property. Those that walk by say their watches still stop working the minute they step foot on the property, and sometimes at night you can hear the cries of the terrifying woman in white. Next up at number 5 is LOYD Hall Plantation. After leaving his London family for a new life in America, William Lloyd built his plantation in 1820. It's rumored that Lloyd was actually exiled from his family's insurance dynasty, hence his sudden move to America, but no one actually knows for sure. Like all plantations of the time, it was a cruel and brutal place for the slaves, but the owner was swimming in money and profit. That was, however, until the Civil War, when it was discovered that Lloyd was working as a double spy for both the Union and Confederacy. Once word got out, Union soldiers stormed his house and tarred and feathered him before he was hanged for his disloyalty. It's said Lloyd now haunts the house along with the many slaves that died while under his care. But that's not all. Others reported a Union soldier named Harry who was shot while hiding in the attic, as well as Lloyd's niece who, after being left at the altar, jumped out the second-story window to her death. Those brave enough to step on the property claimed to hear piano and violins despite no one playing, ringing doorbells when no one is outside, and see furniture moving around all on its own. Some say that if you listen carefully, you can still hear the screams of William Lloyd echo across the property. Coming in at number 4, HOUMAS house. By this point, I am sure you have put together that there were a lot of plantations in Louisiana during the early 1800s. Among that list is HOUMAS house. Said to be haunted by countless spirits of tortured souls from its time as a plantation, the ghosts that live here are sure to send you running for the hills. Among them are 16 souls said to be trapped inside oak trees across the property. All the souls trapped inside lost their lives during a dangerous construction project gone wrong. The trees were a cherished entity to the house, but workers cut down many of the historic oak trees before sending them down the river to be milled. There were 16 profiteers set off aboard the backs of the big tree trunks, but somehow their bodies were never recovered. It's said they remained trapped inside the trees as punishment, stuck on the property they tried to cheat. Among the haunted trees is a mysterious girl in a blue dress, often seen staring at visitors while she remains perched at the top of a staircase, but in the blink of an eye she'll disappear into thin air. And if a creepy girl apparition and Harry Potter trees don't scare you, then just wait until you feel the hand of a cold spirit grab your shoulder. You will never want to return as long as you live. Coming in at number 3, TAYLORTOWN Tower. Once a booming church amongst the community, shortly after its opening in 1906, membership began declining at a rapid rate, and soon the church became abandoned and used for hay storage for the nearby farmers. But how did it go from a church into a bell tower? Well, as the legend goes, a local plantation owner's daughter was engaged to be married, but on the day of her wedding, the groom couldn't go through with it and disappeared without a trace. The bride was absolutely devastated, and in a fit of depression ran to the nearby abandoned tower to end her suffering. It's said the bride jumped from the top of the tower to her death, and her father was so distraught when he happened upon her body that he burned the church down. In a cruel twist of fate, all that survived the flames was the very tower she had jumped from, taunting him until his dying day. Locals say that when there is a full moon, the bride can be seen wandering the land looking for her loved one, screaming and crying out after him. Next up at number 2 is the Bourbon Orleans Hotel. Back in the day, the Bourbon was a highly frequented theater and ballroom where wealthy Creole men could sneak away from their wives to secretly engage in erotic nighttime affairs. But all the fun came to a screeching halt in 1816 when a fire took out most of the building. Fast forward to 1881 and the building was put up for sale and purchased by a community of nuns. But after a brutal yellow fever epidemic struck Louisiana, many nuns and orphans' lives were lost, and that is where the ghost stories begin. Today the building operates as one of New Orleans' most luxurious hotels, but make no mistake, it is haunted by at least 20 different terrifying spirits. Guests have reported the sounds of laughter in the halls when no one was around, and some swear to have seen young people lying in beds with mists of black fog hanging over them. But most terrifying is the ghost who resides in room 644. Rumor has it that during its time as a monastery, a nun took her own life in this very room. Those that have stayed reported hearing blood-curdling screams from the room at all hours of the day, and any guests brave enough to sleep the night were awoken by the nun staring at them over the bed. So if you're looking to be haunted by a creepy nun on your vacation, be my guest, but I'll be looking for different accommodation. And last up today in our number 1 spot is La Pavilion Hotel. Just minutes away from the notorious French Quarter lies the luxurious Pavilion Hotel. But despite its lavish exterior, it is believed to be the home to over 100 spirits, and some paranormal investigators even believe the building sits on top of a portal to the other side. An interesting theory considering the building's less than ideal history. Although today the area is a tourist hotspot, back in the 19th century the ground where La Pavilion sits was deemed completely inhospitable and incredibly dangerous. It was the frequent spot for foul deeds and late night killings, which is likely why so many spirits reside in the hotel's 4 walls. Among the most talked about are a couple seen dressed in beautiful clothing roaming around with googly eyes. The couple will enter an elevator, but then it never goes anywhere. Instead, the usual ping sound rings loudly and the doors open up again, revealing no one inside. Many also claim to have witnessed a young woman on the 9th floor reported to have died on the steps of the hotel. But the truly terrifying entity only reveals herself at night. One guest staying on the most notoriously haunted 9th floor said that in the middle of the night he was woken by a woman dressed in all black, sitting at the foot of his bed. He was speechless and terrified and went to scream, but the entity leaned in, ran her icy cold fingers through his hair, and said, quote, "You belong to me, I'll never let you go." Needless to say, he never returned, and I do not blame him. If I ever saw that lady in my room, I would be running as fast as I could. Starting us off at number 10, Lafitte Guest House. Once the mansion of a very rich man named Paul Gleese and his family, by the 20th century the building became a hotel and has been visited by countless guests throughout the years. But despite the many families that have lived in the mansion prior, it is not them who haunts the building, but a girl named Marie, who died of yellow fever while staying in room 21 with her mother. Legend has it that her mother was so distraught by Marie's death that she would often revisit the hotel and stay in the very room where Marie lost her life. And years later, she too died in room 21. The two ghosts haunt the grounds, terrifying visitors who stay in their room, perhaps hoping to convince them never to return. Those that have stayed report seeing Marie in the mirror in the middle of the night, and that during the day she can be seen walking around the grounds, striking up a conversation with you before vanishing into thin air. And if that doesn't freak you out, the mother's gut-wrenching sobs can also be heard at night, and she too has been known to frighten the guests by turning the lights on and off or throwing objects around to get your attention. All those that enter the room claim to immediately feel a sense of despair and sorrow come over them, and none that visit wish to return. Coming in at number 9, the Logan Mansion. Built in 1897 for a beer distributor named LAFITTE'S Logan, this mansion is believed to be haunted by the ghost of a girl named Theodora Hunt, allegedly the neighbor of Mr. Logan, who one day leapt out of a third-floor window in the attic and plummeted to her death. For years, it has been regarded as one of the most haunted places in the state, with many recent visitors claiming to see items moving on their own, doors mysteriously locking and unlocking themselves, and the giggles of Theodora Hunt coming from the attic. While Theodora tends to be more mischievous than anything, there have been other visitors claiming to hear haunting voices and apparitions in the window where Theodora allegedly fell to her death, and some fear that she has company, and that is what most are truly afraid of. Next up at number 8, the Shreveport Municipal Auditorium. Built between 1926 to 1929, it originally served to commemorate the soldiers who served and lost their lives to World War I. Nowadays, it's a historical performance and meeting venue, and widely known to be riddled with ghosts and paranormal activity. Audience members, tour guides, and staff alike have all experienced something strange while spending time in the building, like doors opening and shutting all on their own, disembodied voices echoing throughout the halls, as well as strange, inexplicable sounds lurking in the shadows. Although not all the spirits are terrifying, one reportedly is often heard clapping and saying, "I love Johnny Cash." There are far more creepy ghosts than friendly ones. Reportedly, a girl is often seen running around the auditorium, and no one knows just who she is or why she's there. And according to legends, during the Louisiana hayride, a woman died in labor in the basement bathroom, and some claim to have heard her moans as if she is still trying to deliver. Coming in at number 7, the Miller Cemetery. Located in Eunice, Louisiana, the Miller Cemetery has more than just buried bodies to creep out visitors. One ghost in particular is known to haunt the grounds, and it's because of him that locals nicknamed it the Headless Cemetery. The Headless Ghost is known to frequent the area, roaming around the graves at night and terrifying guests. But what's strange about this ghost is he's not headless for any horrific death, but allegedly because nobody remembers his face due to the unrecognizable picture on his tombstone, or at least that's the legend we've been told. If a headless ghost isn't enough to keep you away, many have also reported their cars suddenly not working or breaking down as soon as they are on the gravel road by the cemetery. So if you do dare enter, you might just be stranded, and who knows what the headless ghost will do to you then. Next up at number 6, Forbing Tracks. Strangely, or maybe not so strangely, I don't really know the statistics on this one, Miller Cemetery is not the only place in Louisiana where a headless ghost is known to roam. The Forbing Railroad tracks as well have terrifying ghosts that many claim to haunt the grounds at night. Legend has it, one night an old man was reportedly beheaded, and his ghost now wanders the tracks holding a lantern and scaring all that see him. But that isn't all. Apparently a bunch of students also died here many years ago after allegedly being hit by an oncoming train. Legend has it that if you park your car on the tracks and put flower on the back of it, it will mysteriously begin to move on its own, showing the handprints of the students in the flower on the back. But if I were you, I would not try it out for yourself, otherwise you too might be a ghost haunting the tracks of Forbing, Louisiana. Next up at number 5, Magnolia Plantation. I am sure it comes as no surprise that a plantation would be the breeding grounds for tortured spirits, considering how much horrifying and cruel activity occurred on their property during the early to mid 19th century. And Magnolia's plantation is among some of the most haunted. There are stories that a large portion of the activity at this plantation has to do with the countless voodoo curses that were placed on the original owners, but others say that the real horrors of the property are due to the dying room. The name was given to the haunted room as there have been countless tales of slaves and other residents taking their lives in it when they could no longer endure the agony of their existence. Visitors have reported hearing their screams from the dying room to this day, as well as seeing the many spirits lurk around the property. As well, a Union major is believed to have been poisoned in the same room, and sometimes at night you can see his distorted face in the window of the very room he died in. Others claim to have heard chanting, slamming doors, flickering lights, and investigators have even captured audio recordings from several spirits, and maybe most crazy is that motion sensors have been known to go off and on when no one was around. Listen, everyone that visits agrees they are not wanted there. Coming in at number 4, Tefrere's house. Although now it's a cozy bed and breakfast, Tefrere's has a dark history from its time as a plantation, and as such it comes with a bevy of ghost sightings that will chill you to the bone. The most well-known legend of the property is that a woman named Amélie Comeau once jumped into a well after losing her family to yellow fever. Her body was later buried on the property, and some believe she still haunts the grounds, weeping for the family she lost. Others have reported a little girl living in the attic that may come and speak to you, usually asking you to viens voir, which means come see in French, and I'm afraid to know just what she may want you to come up and see. Originally there was a piano in the house that guests could play, but it had to be removed after countless complaints of it being played in the middle of the night and waking up guests. But of course, when the owner would go to check, no one would ever be playing it. So if you're feeling brave, you can go ahead and stay, but as for me, I think I will look for somewhere where a creepy girl ghost doesn't try to swoon me into following her up into an attic. Coming in at number 3, Central Louisiana State Hospital. Believed to be haunted by the near 3,000 patients that are buried on the grounds, this psychiatric facility from 1904 is actually still operating today, believe it or not. Reportedly haunted by all those that died on its grounds, many hospital staff claim to experience extremely strange and creepy activity nearly every single day. Many say they constantly hear slamming doors from one secured only moments prior, witnessing chairs being flipped over when no one was in the room, and even glasses shattering after being hucked across the room. On one occasion, a piece of flooring was discovered broken into pieces, almost as if exploded. Nothing had been broken moments earlier, and none of the staff could figure out how it broke, or rather, what had broken it. As it's still a fully functioning hospital, it's not open to visitors, but some will walk past the building and swear they can hear strange voices or bright shining lights coming from inside the building. Coming in at number 2, Dauphine Orleans Hotel. The historic Dauphine Orleans Hotel opened somewhere around the 1770s and has remained one of the most well-known buildings in the French Quarter, but not for its hospitality, instead for its terrifying ghost sightings. Back in its heyday, there was a brothel in the French Quarter owned by a woman named May Bailey, and what was especially unique about Bailey's business was that she actually had a permit for it, making it completely legal. But despite its legality and popularity among many, May Bailey's sister, Millie, resented her for forcing her into the line of work. Hoping for a way out, Millie ended up meeting a Confederate soldier and the two got engaged, but sadly on the morning of the wedding, her betrothed was shot dead. And so Millie remained trapped to her life of courtship. Today, visitors and staff have reported seeing her roam the halls in her wedding dress, sobbing and crying out for her lost love. But that is not the worst that's been witnessed. Employees say they routinely see glasses fall off shelves, doors unlatched after just being locked, and there is even one account of a bar stool levitating off the ground. But most terrifying of all are the legends of guests checking in and never leaving the hotel. So if I were you, I would pick somewhere else to stay for the night. And last up in our #1 spot, Hotel Provincial. Branded as one of the most haunted places in New Orleans, the Hotel Provincial is located in the infamously haunted French Quarter, and just like every building around it, of course, it's horrifyingly haunted. Now, back in the day, there was a military hospital just down the street from the hotel, and one of the buildings used a medicinal herb garden for the hospital, which seems a little strange, but does make sense once you find out the kind of spirits that haunt the hall. Today the hotel consists of 5 buildings, and although ghosts are known to lurk in each, the most haunted building is believed to be number 5. Guests of building number 5 have reported seeing insane things such as Confederate soldiers covered in blood, moaning from agonizing pain, who miraculously disappear once the lights turn on. Others have reported apparitions of surgeons in the halls, and maybe most disturbing is the amount of guests that have seen strange pools of blood appear on their bedding or the floor that disappear just as fast as they came into view. One guest even reported that as the elevator door opened on the hotel's 2nd floor, the hospital was entirely in view. So it seems as though the soldiers that died in the hospital down the street took a liking to the hotel and continue to haunt all the visitors who enter to this day.